I have an awesome guest on the show today. I have Ted Patestos. Ted, excited to have you on the show.
Hey, Gresh, how's it going, man? Nice to be here.
Yeah, super excited to have you on, Ted. And of course, even more excited to talk about all the awesome things that you're doing. But of course, before we do that, I want to read a little bit more about Ted so you can hear about some of those awesome things. And Theodore Patestos, or Ted, is to transform data into action and leverage it for policyholder advocacy. He has contributed to the public adjusting industry by increasing value to consumers and adjusters alike, developing systems, methodologies, and investing in various software platforms that reduce claim friction. One such technology is Claim Machine, which utilizes weather data to give public adjusters, roofers, restoration companies, and home service businesses leads on impacted properties, increasing their efficiency in sales. In 2023, Ted brought on a fellow insurance claim expert and leaders to create Tiger Adjusters with the goal of developing an effective, affordable franchise that naturally defines the public adjusting industry with innovative excellence. And since establishing Tiger Adjusters, they have recovered over millions of dollars in settlements for hundreds of client claims. And one of the things that we were talking about before we hopped on is Ted was saying so much about how a lot of what they do is for those people that want to advocate. So your first responders, those people that are really trying to make the world a better place, which is why I love everything that they're doing. And he is also a former member of the Army National Guard with an honorable discharge. And Ted also trained as an Army medic and a signal support system specialist. He's 40 under 40 in the Houston Business Journal. And he also is the winner of the Franchise Young Conference's Shark Tank Pitch event. So Ted, you're doing awesome things. Excited to have you on. Are you ready to speak to the IMCO community?
I'm ready to go, Gresh. Whenever we can move forward, we're good to go.
Okay, let's do it then. So to kind of kick everything off, let's rewind the clock a little bit, hear a little bit more on how you got started, what I call your CEO story.
Oh, okay. So I think a lot of people they come up with like what you just read through right now. It sounds like the copywriters that we hired did a really fantastic job kind of zhuzhing it up a little bit as well, I like to call it. I could promise you it wasn't that fancy when we started and how I got into entrepreneurship. To be honest with you, I think I always had the bug for entrepreneur, but with this business, I think it started until 2019. Before that, I was in the corporate space. And to be frank, I left the corporate space because my last boss was just such an asshole, man. He was just super toxic. And so the environment just wasn't, I wasn't digging the vibes. Like, to be honest, I would go into work every day and I was working Monday through Saturday as a project coordinator for a multifamily acquisition firm. And it got to the point after maybe a year or so where I'm walking into work every day. I'm like, I got anxiety because this guy was just off the walls, and it was just, and the money was, it was solid. It was a corporate salary. The money was showing up every 2 weeks, but it just wasn't worth the grind. And so, I actually left and I ended up going to a co-working space and with like $7,000 in savings and said, I'm going to start a business. And then ended up linking up with one of my co-founders, Stuart Severino. He just by happenstance was at that co-working space and we vibed. And we started a business called Predictive Solutions. It was a MarTech business. I've got a background in geographic information systems like lead generation, demand generation. And so we linked up, and Stu's got a really heavy background in MarTech. So we decided that we wanted to start like a marketing technology company to focus on lead generation.
Oh, cool.
And this was at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020. And so we started selling leads to contractors like roofers and public adjusters and people in that space. And then all of a sudden, wham, like COVID happened, right? We were doing really well with the lead sales. COVID hit. We were like, oh man, what are we going to do? Like, we're making pivots. And so a couple of our clients from the public adjusting space reached out to us and say, hey, like the leads work really, we want to do some fee splits with you, but we weren't legally allowed to do that without the public adjuster licenses. And so we got the license. I actually got the wrong license, to be honest with you. I got the wrong license when I first started. And I went and worked for Allstate for like 3 weeks to kind of learn the backside of the business. Came back out. And then me and Stu, I live in Houston. And this was on the back end of that year's storm season. So me and Stu got in the car. We drove out to Beaumont, Texas, which is like right on the border with Louisiana out in East Texas. And we posted up in like a Red Roof Inn, just picking up the phone, calling our own leads. Stu's at the door. It was a pretty rundown motel. So Stu's at the door with the pistol, we want to stay safe. And all joking aside, but it worked out really well. We got a lot of signed contracts, and the business kind of took off from there. So it was not what I call a linear path. It wasn't a straight line. There was a lot of hustle involved and a lot of luck.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you so much for sharing that, because he started out by saying it wasn't that fancy. And I think so many times when people hear or see where people are, they don't see the unfancy stuff. They don't see like the grimy stuff, the things that don't go the way you want them to go. And I appreciate you sharing that because I think when people start out things, they think that, oh, they're gonna snap their fingers and they're gonna reach that success. But hearing that journey, I always say like success is much more like a plate of spaghetti than that straight linear path that people think that it is.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic analogy. Yeah, I mean, I agree completely. I mean, it just it's at least for I can only speak to my experience. I suppose there's probably a lot of people out there well pedigreed and started the race a little bit further ahead. Everybody starts a race at a different place, and so what I'd say to people is, at least for myself, try not to compare yourself to others directly because you don't know where they started the race. They might have started the race 2 miles ahead of you,
Right.
right? And now they're only a quarter mile ahead, and you're looking to them thinking, oh man, like look how far along they are. But in reality, you're moving at a way faster pace than them. So I think that everything's relative. I could go into some stuff, but with my background, I didn't start the race too far ahead, further ahead than some, but not all. And so it definitely takes a hustle and a grind to get that foundation going, and then when you hit, it can go really quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. So take me through like what when you are I guess looking for that grind, that hunger, that hustle, like what is fueling you? What kind of gets you going? What is it that boss that wasn't the great boss that makes you want to kind of take that step, or is there something else that's kind of fueling you more than anything else?
Me personally,
Yeah, absolutely.
fear of poverty, like,
Yeah.
I think, fear is probably a strong word, but when you get a taste, I think that a lot of folks, they find themselves in a position where they don't really know how low you can go, so to speak. Not ethically, not from an integrity standpoint, but just
Yeah. Yeah, true struggle.
if you don't have that safety net
Yeah.
fundamentally built in with your network and it's just you out there, a lot of folks don't have the what I'll say the benefit of tasting that fall. And so
Mm,
for me personally, I got a full taste. I got like 3 full helpings of that fall.
mhm.
Okay. And I said, you know what? That's not going to be for me. So how am I going to work my way out of that? Right? How am I going to hustle my way out of that in a manner that's consistent with doing the right thing and integrity and ethics and all that? Because I think a lot of people, maybe not right off, maybe not intuitively, but a lot of people, they associate not being financially successful with not having ethical, and moral behavior and, focus. And so that's just not the case.
Yeah, absolutely. But I appreciate you so much in sharing that because a lot of times you said the benefit of tasting that that failure, that whatever that is of being your fuel. Because a lot of times you need to. I won't say you always need to, but a lot of times it's hard to know one side of the coin without experiencing that other side. Like you get pushed towards that because you have tasted that, you have experienced that, and you don't want that again, and that ends up being the fuel that develops that grit, which is what you need to kind of have that success. So it's awesome that obviously that you learn from that because there's many people that don't learn from that and don't get to reach and see that success and be able to benefit so many other people.
Yeah, no, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head using the term grit. I mean, I'm not gonna, I think that when you talk about entrepreneurship, I don't know that you can do that without talking about grit. And I also think that it's important. Like, you don't necessarily have to come from an impoverished background or disadvantaged background to have grit, but I certainly don't think it hurts. I think that that's one of the great motivators in being able to develop that because that's really a character thing. Like, you can't teach grit, you can't instill that in someone. That's really an earned quality, in my experience, or in my opinion, I should say. And so that that character trait, in my opinion, is critical to a successful entrepreneurship. That, on the flip side of the coin, if you start out with like a lot of money, that probably helps too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But a lot of times people don't have that grit, but that's
Correct.
such a huge
Right.
thing.
Right.
It's so funny. Damon John, who started Fubu, he has a book called The Power of Broke, and he talks about how that ended up being like his advantage because it made him grittier, made him had to think more creatively on like how to do things because he didn't have like all the zeros in the bank account to be able to make decisions. And a lot of times we forget like some of the struggles, things that aren't to our advantage, sometimes could be our superpowers if we can kind of lean into that and kind of go from there. So I want to drill down a little bit more, hear a little bit more on what you landed on with Tiger Adjusters. Could you take us through a little bit more on like how you're making that impact, what you all are doing there to kind of support the people that you're working with?
Yeah. So I mean, so Tiger Adjusters, when we got past it was under a prior brand that we started the original service company. Prior brand was Smart Claims Public Adjusting, and so after that, kind of that first part of the path there, where we're out in the motel doing our thing, kind of hustling in the beginning to get it going, we ended up with a lot of earned media. So we ended up New York Times and some regional publications like the Dallas Morning News and the Advocate and Times Picayune out of New Orleans. And so once we got that earned media going, it kind of helped propel our business, and it started to grow pretty significantly. Went through a rebrand, and actually on the backside of that earned media, we started getting interest from folks that wanted to do like a trademark licensing deal with us under the prior brand. And that's when we started to learn a lot about like the legal intricacies and nuances of what's appropriate for a trademark licensing agreement. And what we found was there's not a lot of you can't do a lot other than just kind of set brand standards. And so things like operational procedures and protocols and ethical claims processing and training, and it crosses the line. And once you start to implement those mechanisms of support, right, you actually start to cross into franchising. And so if you cross over into franchising and you haven't invested and taken the time to set that up the right way, then you're actually running afoul of legal compliance mechanisms, and that's not how we run things over here. So then we got we made the decisions, my partners and I, to do the rebrand. We rebranded into Tiger Adjusters. We went down the franchise road. We invested super heavy into operational support and trainings, like online proprietary modules, building out processes and protocols and operations manuals, et cetera, to really be able to kind of set the foundation to support future franchisees before we ever started attempting to sell franchises.
Hmm.
And so beyond those sort of what I'll call like pillars of support, which most franchise systems will have, we kind of try and take it a step further, right? So not everybody's going to come in with super sophisticated or well developed business fundamentals, right? And so I actually, myself and some of my other partners, like 3 or 4 years ago, would I have sold today, if we were setting up some barriers, like would I have sold myself a franchise? Probably not, right?
Hmm.
Or some of my other partners, but not to tout our own horns, but we're pretty good operators. And so we wanted to make sure that when future franchisees are coming into the system, yeah, we've got those pillars of support that just about every other system should or does have. But then we go above and beyond, right? So things like marketing segmentation plans for their territories, right?
Hmm.
Reaching out into those territories and setting up B2B referral relationships as folks are going through their training and onboarding when they purchase a new franchise. Working on the back end processing. So when they sign in our business, when they're signing claims in, because we've got a scalable system on the back end with the tech and everything. So we're able to get in to that individual's operations at the unit level and say, hey, you're having some challenges with these claims. This is paper that we're going to turn into money once they get processed and help these. And we're able to do it remotely from anywhere around the country and assist in getting those brought to the finish line. And so I think those sorts of support mechanisms are super important. I'll tell you this, like, I think built a really phenomenal service business.
Hmm.
And now I think we've built like a really great franchise offering.
Hmm.
But when we made the decision to franchise, we didn't know what we were doing. Like we got swindled. We got took for, 150 grand for, certain, third parties that, don't have your best interest. So that's all like a learning experience, for us, in terms of being entrepreneurial. And, that's kind of the cost of doing business, unfortunately. But I think what's come out of that is there's a lot of buzz in the industry about, responsible franchising and this and that. But what I like to say is don't talk about it, be about it. Do you know what I mean? So it's like
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like what responsible franchising means to me is like when you come into this business, like you need to make money.
Right.
Like that's what this is about, right? We need to do the right thing, not run afoul of the compliance. But at the end of the day, like you need to make money. Like you're here to make money as a business owner. And what we're selling to you is an opportunity to say, hey, come into this built out system, right? Where we've experienced all the follies, we've learned, kind of all the nuances and the pitfalls. And our commitment or obligation to a franchisee is to guide you through that so that you don't have those, so that we can get you fast and quick to profitability.
Right. Absolutely. And then obviously sorry to hear that, you went through those challenges, but I think that's part of like what you get when you're looking into a franchise is people that have made the mistakes, have done the great things, and you're able to lean into that so that you can get further along. Like we were talking about in the beginning, like one of the best ways, the quote, I think Einstein quote, it says, in order to see further, you stand on the shoulders of giants. And a lot of times you stand on the shoulders of giants by seeing people that have done things, been successful, and then you get to tap into their expertise so that you can succeed as well and see further.
Gosh, I didn't prepare any Einstein quotes for today. Loving that. I'm loving that.
Yeah,
I
I
dig
always
it.
have
I
one in
dig
my
it.
back pocket here and there.
Yeah, I see that. I see that. No, that's
Yeah,
great. No, I think
yeah,
that's what we're hoping to do, right? That's the whole not just us, but I think in franchising in general. Like if people are interested in coming into a franchise, that's it's a two-way commitment. You're coming into a system. If the system you're coming into is earnest and it's being run by people that have your best interests at heart, like one is if they're telling you that everything is like unicorns and rainbows, like I would run the other direction, right? Because that's just not
right.
business. Like I mean, and if there is one out there that has not a single problem, then DM me because I'm interested. But if that's what you're hearing as someone that's looking at franchising, I think that's a red flag. That would be a red flag for me. That said, kind of to piggyback off what you're saying, that is the upside, right, of coming into a system is that we did experience a lot of issues, early on and really learn the intricacies of not just franchising, but also, of course, the service model itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And while you're DM and Ted, also DM me that too if you do find that information because that that is golden there. But I
It
think
is.
that's the reality of business entrepreneurship, franchising is that it is not that straight linear path. And I think once people have a realization of that, you want to partner with the people that can increase your likelihood of success. And a lot of times that is by seeing and hearing the people that have done the things so that you can kind of tap into that. So for people that are listening to this, maybe not as familiar with public adjusting, what that industry is, what that looks like. Could you take us through a little bit more on like what it is that you would do from a public adjusting standpoint and how that is an opportunity within the franchise?
Yeah, of course. So high level, a public adjuster represents the policy holder in the insurance transaction. So that's a lot of fancy words. So what does that actually mean? Let's say you own your home and you're going to file an insurance claim. Something happened to your house. It could have been that your washer, exploded and leaked water all over your floors, or it could have been that you got hit with a hailstorm or a tornado smacked you or something along those lines and caused some sort of damage. Now you're filing an insurance claim. When folks go through that insurance process, disproportionately, that process is completely managed by the insurance company. So the people you're paying your premiums to are the ones that you're basically picking up the phone and saying, "Hey, come out and tell me how much money you owe me." Right? So think about that kind of within the context. And so unfortunately, what happens, how that manifests is that the insurance companies often will delay payment. They'll underpay that consumer, significantly, or they might just outright deny, even though they actually owe them the money.
Right.
And so, as a public adjuster, we come on as what's called a letter of representation with us. We're going to take that, file it with the insurance company. We're going to write an estimate, do an inspection, write an estimate, size up the value of that loss. We're going to submit that to the insurance company. And then we negotiate on that consumer's behalf with the insurance company to hold them accountable for what they actually owe under that person's policy based on the reality of the damages. And so at a high level, that's what a public adjuster does. There's a lot of kind of nuance. How do we go about that? When we say negotiation, what does that mean? But the overall framework, that's what.
And I think a lot of I guess the DNA of the people that it might be really good for, those people that do have that advocacy, they want to stand up for the people. Cause I feel like you don't even know that that's an option. I didn't even know it was an option till we connected that you can't actually do something like that. So that's why I feel like there's not as much information out there. And I feel like that's where it's
Mhm.
a really tremendous opportunity, it sounds like.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think that awareness for us is a double-edged sword, right? On the one side, it works to our benefit because we're the first people in this space to franchise public adjusting.
Mm.
There is no other public adjusting offering at this time. There will be, I have no doubt. But, in the moment, we're the first to market. I think that is attributable to probably two or three different things. One is the lack of consumer awareness overall.
Mm.
Two is the complacency by other public adjusters in the space, breeded by success. So, in other words, because the ticket prices are so high, because it's a low overhead, low cost business, it's almost exclusively a paper business. You can do very, very well in the industry, even outside of Tiger adjusters, right? You can do very, very well financially in the industry, and that breeds complacency because once people, start making $300,000-$400,000 a year, they might not have that drive or ambition to do something on a larger scale. But what I would say is that for us, disproportionately, our business to the tune of 60 or 65% comes from our contractor referral relationships.
Mhm.
And so the people in the know, even if the broader base is sort of not familiar with the service, their contractors, the attorneys they might hire, those people use public adjusters on a recurring basis. So we have a lot of attorney clients because until attorneys start getting on roofs or going in homes to inspect for damages, they have to call somebody else. And then contractors as well, right? So what contractors don't have is they don't have that contract that they can submit to the insurance carrier to obligate that insurance carrier to deal with them. Their role in the process is not codified by the respective state legislatures. Unfortunately for the insurance carriers, there's just no way around us. And so that's why they have to engage with us. And that's part of the reason why we're so successful. So when I say it's like a double edged sword on that consumer awareness side, I think that because of everything that's been going on over the last, say, maybe 2 to 3 years in terms of changing insurance carrier tactics and the increasing frequency of events. So if you watch the news, and I don't care what news you watch, you're going to see flooding, you're going to see large storms, you're going to see a lot of loss happening, and localized insurance markets taking hits and in some cases collapsing where premiums are going up exponentially. That creates or speaks to the narrative of what's going on more broadly in the industry, and that for our industry only serves to increase demand, right? Because the more that insurance carriers erroneously deny or underpay claims, the higher the premiums are for people. While that's happening, the more likely they are to be frustrated with the process and disillusioned by the process and then seek a solution. And that solution in the moment at a national scale is Tiger Adjusters.
Yeah, that's such a huge thing to kind of be that first mover, and that's usually where some of the best opportunity is to be able to kind of move when people are, twiddling their thumbs or enjoying sipping their pina coladas, feet up, and all those things. But you all being able to kind of make sure that you are being an advocate for those homeowners, for those people that are going through the changes. And I love the idea of like understanding who's having those conversations and kind of, for lack of a better term, kind of partnering or just understanding it's going to be a win-win for the consumer, for the remodeler, whoever's doing the work, and also for that adjuster as well too. So bringing those things together ends up being super huge. So I wanted to drill down a little bit more. Who do you feel like are really great, people that might, be interested in something like this, like the really great fits for people that can succeed at owning that franchise?
Yeah, so I think that there's a couple of what I'll call like low hanging fruit verticals. And so when we think about that kind of low hanging fruit vertical, you can think sort of first responders, right?
Mhm.
So if you take like let's say for example, and for a couple of reasons. One is because this is an advocacy role. So even though it's a super lucrative business and we're a for profit endeavor, there is that empathy and compassion that just is part and parcel of this process, right? So when you're walking into somebody's home and they're going through it and they may be displaced, there's a level of urgency and a sense of responsibility that goes along with that. And I think that foundationally that a lot of first responders have that. They have that call to serve, which is I think a large part of why they ended up in their careers. And if you kind of take it a step further and you look at firemen and fire people, I'll say in particular men and women that serve in the fire departments,
Mhm.
they're they're dealing with, you know, responding to fires. They're when a fire happens, it's not just the physical fire damage, it's the smoke as well that damages the property. So you're talking about, very large losses and people being displaced. So they're kind of used to being on scene in that sense. But beyond first responders, and I'm going to lump in, and I'm a veteran, so I'm going to lump in veterans there as well, veterans and first responders. Beyond that, I actually think that what we found is if you have a solid corporate background, you know, a lot of people think that you need to have like some sort of deep construction knowledge or experience with that before getting into this space. Not the case. I mean, I had some general real estate knowledge before I got into this space, but nothing in terms of construction or methods or anything along those lines. That's just not what we do. This is a paper business. And so anybody that's going to have the ability and sophistication to manage the back end, if you're decent with technology, a lot of this is technology driven. Someone that's going to be able to come into the space and show from a customer service standpoint that sophistication and professionalism. A lot of what we're doing is focused on driving the industry at large forward, right? So we're trying to move away from the guy in the backwards hat with a hoodie,
Mhm.
right? Trying to move away from that. And I'm at home today, so don't judge me, but we're trying to move away from that and we're trying to move that towards industry wide a more professionalized experience for the consumer, something that's replicatable, something where it starts to erode that lack of consumer awareness. And that we think that a big part of the solution to get there is bringing folks into the industry that have that corporate kind of sophistication and polish to help move the industry forward.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I think that's where the opportunity is, again, being those first movers, as literally those first responders are, the first movers in those kind of understanding of like what's happening. But I think also too, like the heart of what they have, the empathy of saying what happened. I feel like those make the perfect sense. But I love how you mentioned that. I think there's a book, The E Myth by Michael Gerber. He talks a lot around like most people think entrepreneurship is doing the things that you're doing, the service or product or whatever it is, you're doing that on a daily basis. But in reality, a lot of times you're spending a lot of time and energy doing those foundational things, the management, the conversations, the sales, like those are things. So that makes it perfect for those people that are in that corporate environment, because that's ultimately what you're doing is you're having those conversations, you're driving it forward so that you can make that impact on your community and beyond.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the important thing is we're not here pitching someone to become a public adjuster in the sense of that that's going to be your job, and you can be an owner operator. I think that's fantastic, right?
Hmm.
And so in that sense, but really that's not what the model is. The model here is how do you run a public adjusting business, and from a business standpoint, is it a viable model? How do we optimize and make it efficient to the extent that you're going to be able to run it as a manager or as an owner without ever having to go into a property and inspect it per se. It depends on how you're going to be approaching the franchise model. Are you going to be an owner operator? I don't like to use the term semi-passive or absentee. I understand that that's like a buzzword in the industry, and I get that. I just think that it's disingenuous to the extent that when you buy a business and when you go to run a business, it can be, you don't have to necessarily be in the daily weeds every minute of the day, but it's like a crying baby. Everybody knows that analogy, right? I mean, it's like a crying baby, and so if you don't tend to it, that's a big problem. And so that's what I would say is I don't like to use the term semi absentee, but there's probably a better term out there. So they can DM that to me too, so I can learn that. But there's definitely an opportunity to run the business in a way that where you as an individual are not out there being necessarily the hands-on public adjuster on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, keep me on the DM chain as well too, because I want to hear that too. But I think that's such a huge thing when you understand that. Understand that when you coming into business, you can do it in a different way, the way that you see and have that vision, and make sure that that happens. So I wanted to switch gears a little bit, and I want to ask you for what I call a CEO hack. So this could be like an app, a book, or a habit that you have. But what's something you lean on that makes you more effective and efficient?
I mean, I hate to be kind of a cliche, but I'm a heavy ChatGPT user, and I don't use it in the same way I think that a lot of people use it. So we don't use it for copy, as an example. We've got folks that that do, copywriting, and there's a reason for that. Just, I'll throw this out there is that the way that the Google algorithm weights artificial intelligence copy, the words on a page, it weights it, it deranks it a little bit. So we keep that authentic. But I actually use it to set up conversations with an objection. So there's actually a term, it's called prolipsis, which is it's the Latin word for or phrase for the anticipation of an objection, right?
Mm.
And so what I like to use chat for is I'll go in there and I will game out different scenarios on ChatGPT to help guide my decision making. And I'll ask ChatGPT to create objections, whether it's for a sales process or it might be for maybe, governance, right? For cap table governance and things like that, and kind of have like this, ebb and flow within the conversation of chat. And if I can't beat chat, then I got to figure out a better strategy, right? And so I use it to kind of help refine my decision making a little bit.
Yeah, that's absolutely. You sure you don't have an Einstein quote? Prelipsis? I have not heard that word before. That might be that one's up
That's
my
my only one. That's
that's
all
your
I
only
got.
one. Just keep it in the back pocket. You
That was the
never
whole
know.
thing. That was the whole.
But I absolutely love that. I think one of the things that we get stuck on as entrepreneurs, CEOs, business owner, whatever title we might give, is we get caught in our lane of like how we're looking at things. I love that back and forth because I think a lot of times it could give you that perspective. But as you said, I feel like you start to strengthen whatever it is you're trying to do, whether you're trying to make a presentation, you're trying to come across a different idea. When you have that back and forth, it's only going to strengthen what you're trying to do at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean that's the goal, right? Is to just get better and strengthen it. I think that for me personally, right? And I would hope anybody else that's leading a team or attempting to lead a company, like you need to be real with yourself. I mean, like, I mean, you might have been successful in three other businesses, but if you're in a new business, like it's a new game, right? There's transferable skills, of course. I mean, that's the benefit of an experienced operator and an experienced leader. But if you're telling yourself that you've got this 100% and you don't need to strengthen your game, like I'm, don't come around me, bro, because I'm not interested. I'm not interested. That's you're not being honest with yourself. And if you can't be honest with yourself, I can't expect you to be honest with me. So I think for myself, I recognize, and for other people on our leadership team, I think we all recognize that there's always opportunities to improve. We should be striving to improve on an individual or personalized basis. And then also that extends to the offering and the organization, right? If a business to someone as a franchisor, you're obligating yourself to that individual. So like you need to actively and proactively work to be better at serving your customer, which is the franchisee. So if that's not the mentality that leaders are going to have at the level, then I would disagree fundamentally with the way that they approach this business.
Yeah, that's huge. And I appreciate you, as you were saying, just talk about it, be about it. And I think when you have that, and it's not just a thing that you check off the box, it's a mentality that you have. And I think when you step into that, it just makes everything better. As you said, the people that are thinking about, coming in or stepping in as franchisees, they get the opportunity to know that it's not just about like where you are today, it's the constant improvements that you're doing because you're constantly open to being able to kind of sharpen that saw and ultimately kind of be better. So what would you consider to be a little bit more what I call a CEO nugget? So this could be like a word of wisdom or piece of advice. I like to say it might be something you would tell a franchisee if they were thinking about the business, or if you hopped into a time machine, you might tell your younger business self this.
So I do have a quote. I'm going to paraphrase. Okay. I actually read this. This popped up in my LinkedIn feed. I don't know if it was last night or 2 nights before, but I was like, oh man, this is going to be great for the pod when I'm with Gresham. And I think it's Carl Ung, Jung, question mark. But he said something along the lines of, real life starts at 40 and everything up until 40, you're just doing research. And so if I had to go back in time and tell my younger self something, I'd probably tell myself like, hey, like, chill out. It's going to be okay. Play it slow, learn as much as possible, refine your skills, understand that some of life's challenges are to your benefit in the long run, and just kind of go with the flow. Because I think when, at least for me, younger and kind of coming up, you're so eager to be successful. You're so eager to get out there. And then sometimes what, at least in my experience, what ends up happening, when you're in those 20s and kind of early to late 20s, you're running as fast as you possibly can and you're making mistakes that you didn't have to make along the way. So
Yeah.
you're not going to
Well,
beat the clock. Nobody's making it out alive.
yeah, absolutely. If you run into my younger self as well, Ted, tell him that as well, because it is so true. Because he definitely do that. You want to reach that success. You want to taste it as quickly as possible. And sometimes you skip steps and you miss things that you shouldn't miss because you're in such a race to get to where you want to be. But I think that if you have that understanding, is that like it's research, you're learning those things, you're doing those things to get better. You understand the true journey of success, what it looks like, and how to actually take the steps that will ultimately kind of get there and be there.
Yeah. I think a lot of people coming up probably have a similar kind of experience. I think that's one of the challenges of youth, right? Like you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And so you start to look at everything and it's hard, look, it's hard I can't even imagine growing up in today's world, man. I think that the world's it's a totally different level and not everything is on social media, your feed, and all of a sudden it looks like there's somebody that they're 28, they have $47 million. You're flipping through, they made it in 18 months. There's 7 Lambos sitting in the driveway. But that's not real, right? And I think that's a disservice to people coming up today that I would just put on people's radar to kind of watch out for. Like those Lambos are rented. Okay. There's a line of credit and it's underwater. don't do it. So yeah, I think that's my nugget.
Yeah, and that's such a huge thing because I think it does a disservice to the people that are trying because you're looking at that. I always say if you run your own race, you can't lose. And so many people are looking at everybody else's lane and they're saying, I'm doing it wrong because I don't have the 47 million. I have one Lambo or whatever it is that it might be. They may not have what that other person has. They think that they're doing it wrong and they throw in the towel before they get started. So I think that's such a powerful thing because if you truly understand that, then you'll start to respect the journey, respect the process, and respect those steps.
I agree.
Absolutely. So
got a
what
lot of
would you,
wisdom.
yeah, absolutely. So what would you consider to be your answer for my absolute favorite question, which is the definition, what it means to be a CEO? Our goal is to have different quote unquote CEOs on this show. So Ted, what does being a CEO mean to you?
I could tell you it's not half as much fun as I thought it was going to be based on what I saw on social media. So I think for me, what it really means is that at the end of the day, it's I'm accountable and responsible, to other people, right? So I spend my day, I think for me, it's, working with my team members at on the leadership team, and then, folks that aren't on the leadership team, in the admin roles, and then speaking to franchisees, and then speaking to, consumers at the unit level. And at the end of the day, like I'm here to serve every single one of those people, right? It's just in a different way, right? So what that boils down to is that it consists of me engaging with people that I have a responsibility to, and then every once in a while, some problem gets thrown out there that I'm responsible to solve that nobody else is in a position to solve. And if it was an easy enough problem for somebody else to solve, it would have already got solved before it got to me. So I think that that's been my experience as a CEO, right? I mean, you're just constantly at a place where you're engaging with folks that you have responsibility to, and you're solving problems that only you are in a position to solve. And that means that every day showing up matters, right? I had a trip recently. My wife and I took a trip to Europe, and there was an issue that the company had that I had to deal with. And so because of the time difference, I ended up on the phone until like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. We were gone for almost 3 weeks, but I ended up on the phone until 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning for probably 7 to 10 days of that period, right? And it's not a good look if anybody's married. Wasn't an ideal situation, but it was the reality, right? And nobody else was in a position to kind of do that. And so it requires that attentiveness to the business.
Yeah, I love that accountability, that responsibility. And I always joke and say that every entrepreneur, CEO, business owner is part-time firefighter. So sometimes you have to put those fires out, and those fires don't wait. Sometimes for you, you have to go and attend to them as much as you can. So I truly love that definition and perspective. And of course, I appreciate your time even more. So what I wanted to do now was pass you the mic, so to speak, just to see if there's anything additional that you can let our readers and listeners know. And of course, how best people can get a hold of you, find out about all the awesome things you and the team are working on.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate the time being able to come on the show. Gresham, I really appreciate that and the exposure. And we all know that you do a fantastic job with the pod. So thank you for your time and your platform. So I can be reached at ted@tigeradjusters.com. And if you go at tigeradjusters.com onto our team page, you'll find an opportunity to book on my calendar. So you can do it right on the website there. What I would say is we're an emerging franchise brand. We take extremely seriously our focus on supporting franchisees. We're the only people in this space. We think we have a phenomenal business offering, and we think 2025 is going to be something to speak about from a growth standpoint. So as far as Tiger Adjusters is concerned, we'd love for people to come in and and explore the opportunity, kick the tires, do a deep dive, fact check what I'm saying, and what we purport to be. But more broadly, whether you're looking at Tiger or you're looking at another franchise brand, make sure that you do your due diligence, right? Because not everybody is out there. Not everybody is out there. If you're not working with a broker that you've built a relationship with, which I think is probably to your benefit, but if not everybody's out there looking out for your best interest. A lot of people are just out there, trying to sell you, a used Honda with 180,000 miles for 3K above market, right? And so don't buy it. Don't buy it. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So just use your discernment and wisdom.
Absolutely. Well, I truly appreciate that, Ted. Of course, to make it even easier, we're going to have the links and information in the show notes as well, too, so that everybody can reach out to you, find out about all the awesome things that you all are doing. But I love, love, love that last point, because I think so many times we can get to the heart of things by asking questions and not being afraid of asking questions, or at least partnering with people that are able to help us to know what questions to ask. And I think if we don't do our due diligence, we don't ask those questions, we don't really understand what we're getting into, that's just going to set us up not for the success that we ultimately want to have. So truly appreciate you. Of course, I appreciate your time. Also, I'm looking forward to the or something. I don't know if you ever seen the Jeff Bezos with the Amazon, where he had it written on a cardboard box, Amazon.com. I could see that in front of the hotel, you and all the awesome things that you all are doing, and having that picture. So I look forward to seeing that soon.
Oh man, I appreciate that. Hopefully I can keep my hair though.
All right. Have a great rest of the day.
All right, Gresham. Thanks. You too.